music's low right now. Tell us who you are and tell us why you're here and what is significant about this weekend.
For me, I'm Paul Middleton from the Congress of Curiosities Traveling Oddity Museum. We're based out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. And it is significant for me to be here because it has always been my dream to be a showman, to be an oddity purveyor. And I'd always thought when I was little that the time had come and gone and that, it was just a thing of the past. But this weekend here is the people not only were paying homage to the greats, but it's also for the new generation, the new people that are stepping up, trying to make it work again, trying to keep it alive. And so it's very exciting for me.
Behind you is a cyclops. Is there significance to the banner behind you?
Oh, yes. This actually it's one of my first acquisitions. There was a gentleman who was selling his whole show, and it was the horrors of drug abuse, and it had these giant banners, and it had the Cyclops baby, and it had the two-headed baby, and it was billed as the horrors of drug abuse. If you've started, stop. This kind of thing. And I thought, oh, what a great way to get into it. I went up, purchased it from him. He had a complete 30-foot banner line tent, and I thought, my dream is coming true. And I went to set up the tent, and after driving stakes in for 5 hours and hauling poles and finally getting the thing up, I thought this actually kind of sucks. This is an aspect of the whole business I wasn't thinking about. But eventually we were able to ditch that, and we're trying to find new venues for it. But this is an actual show that sat on the Midway for many years,
Called
The Horrors of Drug Abuse. And man-made monsters here. Mother Nature's mistakes, children born of addiction.
What would you see when you went to a horrors of drug abuse exhibit?
What you would see is you would see the children of forgotten fathers. You would see 5 unfortunate children who would never grow up. They would never learn how to drive. They would never learn how to toss that football because their parents did drugs. And they were all hidden behind the curtain. And they're all in jars. And for 50 cents, you could take a gander at them.
And what would you see?
And you would see children, misshapen children, children who should have been granted a normal life, should have been granted all the things we have, but due to the drug abuse or radiation in the water or whatever it was, they're just on display for us now, floating in their
whatever they're floating in.
Whatever they're floating in. They're formaldehyde, that's it.
Why don't you take us on a tour, Paul?
Okay.
We'll show
Go ahead.
Right here, what we have, not only is this a shrunken human head, but this is the world's smallest human head, the world's smallest preserved human head. And I'll show you the secret. Here's the secret. If you turn it around, and you can see the gash there that's kind of sewn up. This is where the skull is removed. And the skull is removed from the head, and then the head is what you're left with is sort of a mask of human flesh. And this is what is boiled down. This is what is baked until all the oil is taken from it, and what you're left is kind of a hard shell, kind of a beef jerky, a Slim Jim, a shrunken head. And if you could see, you could just barely see where the mouth was sewn up. And this is the head of maybe a 5, 6-year-old child.
It's a baby. How did you come to get it? And how rare are real shrunken heads?
Real shrunken heads are very rare, and I was to get it from a showman friend of mine. This has been, I guess, floating around in collections for years and years and years. And what it is, this is the head of a small child. We believe this to be the world's smallest shrunken head. Turn it around and you can see the back. This is where the skull is removed. The skull is removed, it's sewn back up, And then the lips are sewn up. You can just barely see the strings. And you can see where they put sticks in the nose to keep the shape of it.
Why did somebody make a head of a small child? And how did it get onto the circuit of sideshows?
How it got to the circuit is a mystery. But talking to some experts, what it could have been is if there was a raid, what they would do is if there was a child that may have been old enough to remember what happened, old enough to take vengeance on the people who raided, that they would shrink their head as well. And that's what happened to this child. And the life force is trapped inside, you see. It's like a little cell, and inside this is supposed to be his soul, still trapped after all these years.
What kind of raid? I mean, is it? It's from what part of the world?
This is from South America, Hivero. I'm not quite sure exactly. It will take a lot of research to find out where this head came from, because it's been floating around in collections like a lot of them. But it comes from South America. The practice has been banned, they say, for a good 50 years or so, but you never can tell. Smallest preserved human head.
It's kind of tough. It's tough seeing a kid. You know, that's really pretty grim.
It's pretty grim. But it's a grim world out there.
So Shrunken Heads, were they exhibited on sideshows?
Oh yeah, they were exhibited on sideshows. Some of them were real, some of them were phonies, you know, but they were a big draw. Some shows were nothing but shrunken heads, just lined up. And they're always, because people can't believe they're real. People don't know, how do you take a human head and shrink it to this size? And the secret is, of course, the skull. It's removed. And then you just wind up with this hard shell of a human being. And here they are. These are our children. The children who will never grow up, the children who will never go to college, the children that you're never going to have to feed and you'll never get a life insurance policy of. These are the victims, the horrors of drug abuse. These little kids were on display for the Midway for years and years and years. And this is what people paid their quarter to see. As you can see, all sorts of afflictions. This one here, born, well, he wasn't quite formed right, if you know what I mean. These are reproductions. These are casts made of the real ones. And because the real ones, there's just too much of a legal issue, you know. But really what you do, you put them in, you fill them with water, put a little coffee, put a little Coke in, separate them, the people about 10 feet from them, and usually they can't tell the difference. This is what I bought. This was my first, because the guy was going out of business, and I thought, what a great way to get into it. I'd been up there earlier to look at this thing he had called Alligator Man, which was a mummy wrapped up, and it was great. It had a truck, and it showed the natives were wrapping up Alligator Man, and Alligator Man was strangling a snake. But when he had this show for sale, I knew this was the one. This was just had that kind of gruesome edge for today's audience. And it still gets a rise out of people, you know? No matter how jaded they are with TV and CNN and video games, whenever they see this, they just can't believe it.